Hello and welcome to Your Life But Easier. Today I have with me Keith Blevens. Keith is a very special person and one of my wonderful mentors I have in my life. And he is a clinical psychologist. Is that correct, Keith? Clinical psychologist, and he is took it on to him to share with the world the three principles, which you heard me already talking about in my last podcasts. And with Keith today, I would like to talk about what's the deal with body and mind. When we hear normally everyone talking, and I was looking up today at Google what Google says about body and mind. And so when I was asking Google, what is the connection between body and mind? Shall I just read it out quickly? It said, the brain and body are connected through neural pathways made up of neuron transmitters, hormones, and chemicals. These pathways transmit signals between the body and the brain to control everyday function, breathing, digestion, pain sensation, to movement, thinking, and feeling. Now I would like to hand over to Keith. And Keith, when you maybe just quickly would like to introduce yourself and then tell us what's the deal with body and mind, and how do we see that in the three principles? Well, and I want just to say how we see that in the principles is not our personal opinion. We're talking here about a fundamental logic, and I always want to point that out in my podcasts. This is not a belief or anything. We're talking here about a logic of how our moment-to-moment experience is created, and it is not a technique or anything else. And I don't want to go further into it. Please, I hand over to you, Keith. And
okay, thank you. No, I very much appreciate being here, and I want to say just a few words about myself. I had the good fortune early in my career, about 40 years ago or so, of stumbling into. I heard a story about a man who these seminar leaders had met, and they were struck by his simplicity about the past. And I was a recent graduate with a fine doctoral program here in the United States, and he, this enlightened man, they called him, which I had heard of such things, but I never really met anyone. I've never met anyone like him, and I was soon to meet him, and he really just blew my mind and continued to for the next 40 years or 32 years that he passed away in 2009. And his name is Sidney Banks, but he just challenged so many assumptions. And when I heard this about the past, that the past was just thought, and not really more than that. I started to hear these, insinuations about the past, but pertaining to what you just read about the mind and the brain. And one of the things that he said early on that was really quite alarming or interesting to me, he said that mind is not brain. And I thought, Mind is not brain. Mind is not brain. Well, what is mind, and what is brain? If they're not, if they're completely different, well, like when we say, for example, mind body, that just rolls out of our tongue, and we think we're we don't realize what mind and brain are in our thinking current day are interchangeable. Just like your Google definition, it presumes brain right away, and when you say mind, it's brain. But he was insistent that they are not the same, and that was really um, kind of confrontational to me, but intriguing to me because I could tell he knew what he was talking about. And I thought, so let me hear more. And so that was the beginning of a lifelong collaboration between me and Sydney Banks. And he then made many recordings. He made many. He wrote 6 books and has other books that are yet unpublished that are in the mill or in the queue. And he gave me his last book, um, um, which I have not published yet. So all that is to say, back to this mind body thing. Um, there was a certain, because he said mind is the intelligence of all things, whether in form or formless. Well, that's clearly uh, beyond brain, or different from brain. I've held a brain in my hands in a neurology class in my undergraduate work, um, and we studied the brain. And as part of our psychological training, a brain was the brain was mind, and so he broke that definition asunder, and by saying that it's the intelligence of all things, whether in form or formless, he was really as part of his enlightenment experience, you might say, that the next day he said, his mother-in-law challenged him. He was a welder, and his mother-in-law challenged him, and because he had said the day before that what I just learned will change psychology and psychiatry forever, and it will lead to the healing of millions and millions of people. And he had this, and you can read about this or find out about it with his writings, but he had this profound realization or insight, you could say, but it was an enlightening experience, because thereafter he would talk. When he would talk, he would kind of switch into a profoundly simple and logical way of talking, and it was just beautiful, and it was always profound and intriguing, and it was so simple. And he said once that people call what I say being mystical. He says it's not mystical, it's simple and profound. So the day after this enlightenment experience, his mother-in-law challenged him and said, "Who do you think you are? Like you don't know the first thing about psychology and psychiatry." And he said, she was right. I don't. But I do know that I found these 3 principles: divine mind, divine consciousness, and divine thought. And he said, and I'm sure I would be very surprised if anyone studying psychology or psychiatry today know anything about mind, consciousness, and thought. And so his mother-in-law kind of quieted down, and she started to ask him questions. And because she had seen such a profound change in him in only 24 hours, that she became a student and a listener. So he found these principles, which psychology as a science has never had. Since its inception, it has never been principle based. So I got a PhD in a discipline that was not really a science. And it never been science. Now I did scientific experiments investigating the differences in diagnostic categories: schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, alcoholism, etc. And I prided myself in being in a program of a scientist practitioner, but there were no principles. Now I didn't know that at the time, so I got my doctorate degree. No one ever mentioned to me, oh, by the way, psychology is not a science. Biology is a science, chemistry is a science, astronomy is a science, but not psychology. Psychology had been searching for her principles since the beginning. And one of the people that knew that the best and spoke about it the best was William James, who was the father of American psychology. And so he said that psychology was not a science. It is only the hope of a science. He was very honest, and he said, I don't know what the principles are, and but I hope someday, sure they surely will be found. Well, lo and behold, 81 years after he wrote that was in 1892, in 1973, this welder in British Columbia finds the three principles, and he talked about them the rest of his career, the rest of his life. He had no career, no professional career. He was a welder, but then he became an internationally known speaker, and the rest is history. So this mind thing that he found, divine mind, divine consciousness, divine thought, or he would change it sometimes and would say universal mind, universal consciousness, universal thought. And or he would say, let's just call it mind, consciousness, and thought. He and he defined them in consciousness. He says, you've already got a mind, you're already connected to mind, you can't not be. You're already connected to consciousness, you can't not be, you're aware. Then thought is the key, because thought as a power, not as not involving your personal thinking, is a very important point here. Your thought itself as a cosmic divine power that everyone is vested with on the planet, including animals, all living creatures, large or small, have these three principles in operation, and they establish the lack of separation between God mind, God thought, God consciousness, and us. So they're the missing link. So nothing thereby do we apprehend, comprehend, think about, experience. These three principles are the bedrock of the human experience, and nothing beyond them is necessary for the human experience. They are the living missing link. They're the missing link. And so thereby all of us are holistic creatures. We are already in this holism, and we cannot be separated out. And the power of thought, not thinking, but the power of thought before form, is the guiding principle of our lives, and that level of thought as a power is a a, a guidance system, an intelligent guidance system that all thinkers have and are. But
I like the word gift. It's
yeah,
the, isn't it? Yeah, like he said, the gift that is supporting us through life, the gift we have, and then depending how we use that, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. But looking at the the condition of this world with war and depression and drug addiction, and I mean the Pandora's box of psychological sicknesses and mental sicknesses, clearly we don't know that we're connected. We don't know, we don't and thought allows us to recognize this connection. So we already have the gift of thought to allow us to recognize this inseparability. There's an inseparability. So back to the question then of brain and mind. Brain being, a marvelous physical organ, just like so many of our physical organs, but it's not the inseparability of mind and thought and consciousness don't really pertain to body. Like when he talked about these three principles, he said they are beyond time, space, and matter. So they're not conceptual, like you said earlier. They're immortal. They're profoundly. They are existence themselves. So this existence that we really are permanently in, when coming into, there's something about these principles that wake this oneness up, and human beings are becoming wiser of their place in the universe, in the cosmos, and so that harbors a future of profundity and beauty and brotherhood and all the things that we all think of as near and dear to our hearts, but to honestly recognize it's already been endowed, and having a psychology, having a three principles psychology that honors that completely and recognizes that unity, is going to really change things for human beings on Earth. It's the greatest secret on Earth, because it wipes out this illusion of separation. And so when I was talking to you, and I because having read and having been almost, you might say, relegated to this illusion of separation, and realizing now the mental sicknesses that harbors, because once you're separated, you're on the search, and this life becomes a search, and and you're lost in a false separation. Then the mental sicknesses and the race is on, and to wipe that separation out, which the three principles do, then, you know, you might say peace on earth is around the corner.
Mm.
And wouldn't that be something? And another thing that Sid said once, he said, don't think that, he says, when you die, you'll realize that it's all one. But the only place where the separation rules is here on earth. And it causes all manner of psychological sicknesses and problems. And so here is the only place we need to find that the truth of that oneness, and understanding brain and body as being part of that oneness, not as something to be reckoned with independently on its own, is a really wonderful scientific proposition.
Mm. I have here something he wrote in the missing link, and it says, our senses have no ability to discriminate. They are controlled and informed by our personal power of thought. Without thought, our five senses would be of no value. Our five senses and our egos are but particles of the whole, just as the illusion of time and space are only particles of the whole. The answer people seek lies not in their separate beliefs, but in the realization that thought, with a capital T, is the common denominator in all psychological and spiritual understanding.
I mean, amen, brother, you might say, but he wrote that and said, because he knew that. And but it's challenging to fathom it, and it stretches us, but the truth does so. And in one of the transcriptions that I was reading to you recently, he again said, this is logical and simple, and that's all I'm interested in. And then he went on to say, right at the very beginning, he said, this has nothing to do with religion, but if you, so he kind of separated it out as the science of mental life. But he says, if you see this and you see these principles, then that will unbelievably enrich your religious life. And also he said, I'm not going to talk politics, which I thought was really interesting. He said, I just want to talk truth. And so to have truth be isolated, logically separated from religion or uh, uh, from politics or from any other of these matters in our experience bank, is a real boon to people, because it's a new order of study, a new order of a discipline, and it is a universal psychology, which psychology has never been so. So it's a new, you might say, even a new field of logic and simplicity and universality that that psychology, for one, has always dreamed of. but they never had principles that recognized it. And so, and then through the years, various psychologists would come up with their principles, but they would fade away because they weren't really solid. Now, here this welder comes along and stumbles into this universal knowledge in enlightenment, and then speaks from it so beautifully, so profoundly, so stunningly, and rigorously. It's absolutely rigorous. He doesn't vary. Has been a real cosmic development in my life, and will be in anyone's life who then trying to elevate him to be, a god or anything like that. I'm just saying that he found it, and in this one recording that I know you know about, called The Insight, that was recently released after it was recorded in 2006. It's just been recently released. He says, and quite emphatically, he says on this recording, he says, I know. And he raises his voice like he knew what he found, and he wasn't about to be watered down or bullied out of it. And most of the voices that he talked to through the years, in one way or another, were intent on doing that. They just didn't know. They didn't really know the grand nature of the knowledge of the person they were dealing with, which is, how could they? But he stuck to his guns, even being a welder, and from Scotland too. But he was really quite a voice, and so now we have the chance to operate from that oneness, talk from it ourselves, and bring others along, because that wakes up humanity's wisdom, and that and he said over and over and over again, and that will heal millions and millions of people. And you can see why it would, because it's done that for me. It's healed me of my misunderstandings of a false separation, and it's quieted my errant thinking mind down to a whisper, and then to mostly a total silence. And it's changed my life, and it will change anyone's life, because it's true. And what a great era of history that we live in, that we're witnessing this oneness, and mutually beginning to experience it, and what happens. Watch what happens to your behavior. You become a better person, and things that you used to do, with without thinking, fall away, because your conscience bothers you. You can't really. My wife she's from Texas, and she has a funny way. She says, these principles make me behave. That's how she.
But there is it's always pointing you back to the North Star, doesn't it? I was just recently, and I just said that actually in my last podcast, but I was recently in Germany visiting my parents, and my mom got dementia, and it's just getting old is not really always that that much fun, or it can be having moments where it's not that much fun. And I got totally caught up in the story when I was with my parents. I saw them and I just thought, oh, this is just so sad. And where is this going to lead? And what can we do? And I just got completely caught up into that story. And I stayed in an Airbnb, and I just found in the evening I got very quickly tired as well, because I had loads on my mind. And so one morning, and I didn't sleep very well for 2 nights. I didn't sleep very well. And one morning I got up and I was on the fourth floor, sat outside. It was beautiful, warm weather, and I had the morning sun shining onto the balcony, and I was sitting there drinking my hot water. And suddenly it came to me, oh my God, I'm so caught up, I was so caught up in the story. I don't need to go there. There is no reason to go there. I really got caught up here.
Mm.
And in that moment, my mind got so quiet.
Mm.
And I was present, I was here, and I noticed there's nothing for me to figure out. And whatever it will be, that's what's on. And somehow we deal with it, and it will be okay, whatever is. And from that moment again, I slept brilliantly. I slept I slept wonderfully, and my mind was far more quiet again.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this understanding is doing. It doesn't give us anything to do, but it can have an effect on our physical being when we get caught up in the story. But in the moment when we see that's not how it is, we are in the illusion of how we see life in that moment. And in that moment, we are back to experience peace and quiet, a quiet mind.
Mm.
And in that moment, the sleep improves or can improve. Well, it is inevitable, I think you say in English. It is inevitable that we get more quiet. And I remember one of my first things I realized on me when I came to this understanding, which is now, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago. I was sitting in the car driving along, and I always had a little bit tension in my shoulders, right? And I was driving along and I thought, oh, I used to go every month at least once to a massage. I don't have to do this anymore. I just feel this day so much more relaxed in my physical being. So because my mind is more quiet,
Mm.
I have far less thinking going on. And I get always pointed back very quickly. Of course, I go off track. I wouldn't be human if I wouldn't be, right? But through that, my physical being changed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just keeps, in the way to say it, like it keeps disentangling you from those tensions or those things that are that radiate into your physicality, be, because your thinking is involved in the mess, you might say. And so when the mess dies or goes away or goes asleep, then your body uh loves it, and your body says, she's finally giving us a break here. Let's take a nap or whatever.
Yeah.
Say it in some funny way, but like that starts to happen, and you become more in sync with. There's a synchronicity that's a felt thing. Like you can tell when your personal mind goes to sleep and your universal mind, um, which was always there in the first place anyway, starts informing you. But you know that synchronicity, you know what it creates? There's a beautiful word that it creates, is harmony.
Mm.
Creates harmony in anybody on the planet at any moment in time. Is only, that thought that you could say it, one thought away from harmony. I mean, my God, I've never heard of anything so universally accessible and true and honest and logical, that doesn't involve a technique or a method or study or whatever. Like it's kind of uh, relaxing back into the truth, and the truth will set you free and help you every single time. Because the only time that you feel that separation, and by the way, that usually is accompanied by a negativity, because this innate health of these three principles that the three principles establish is totally free of negativity. And so the the ensuing harmony is a telltale um, reverberation of you being in sync with the cosmos and this intelligence, and and uh, and that's what human beings have been searching for since the beginning of time. I mean, if we go back to I haven't really talked to a Cro-Magnon person, but or a uh, a soldier from Norway in BC, or but you can just easily see, oh, there was tension, and people were warlike, and we still are. You don't have to see, you don't have to look beyond modern day, but to know that all that is curable, completely curable, that it's the science of mental life shows us the and the principles of the science of mental life um, create a uh, create exactly what everybody's searching for. And you're saying it in your own way, and other people say it in their way, but it's a constant a miracle of finding yourself, finding the truth, and being healed accordingly, not by your own hand, but by the cosmos, the way the cosmos works. So we're getting in sync with this divine intelligence and divine mind, and divine thought, and we're reaping the dividends thereof, because it suspends the suffering needlessly. The suffering needlessly is a cue to us all, not a failure, but just an honest cue, you missed it. And no no judgment about that at all. Just a matter of fact um, assessment, and listen, and you'll find your way back to where you belong, home, always. That's quite a thing.
So why is it so difficult for people to see this simplicity? Because what I love about it and what is so powerful is this simplicity. Our experience is created from thought, full stop. When we really understand that insightfully, it's just so powerful. And as soon as people see it, and when I had my aha moment, my first one, then so my first moment, my first ever insight was I was on a weekend retreat here in Exeter, and I went I went on my lunch break, or we had lunch break, and the sun was shining outside, and there was a lady sitting in the car eating her lunch. And I went out with my lunch, and I wanted to sit in the park nearby. And then I thought that she could think, that I could think, what is she sitting in the car eating her lunch? And the next thing I thought was, oh, that's a lot of thinking I'm having here on my mind. And in that moment, I realized that everything is thought created. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, this is huge. And I don't have to have all this thinking anymore. That was the first from for everlasting insights I will have till the end of my days.
Disappearing,
Yeah.
you know? Wow.
And
Hey,
I had a big insight. I was just doing a tour de Europe. Like I said, I was in Germany, and then we went to France. So we went first to Switzerland as well, and then we went to France. And on the way back, we went to Normandy, and we stayed 2 nights in Normandy in a really sweet old cottage. They have these really lovely cottages, which looks a little bit like Asterix and Obelix. I don't know if you know Asterix and Obelix. Do you know that comic? No? It's like a French comic, and the houses there with thatched roofs, and the roofs go really low, and it has wooden beams, and they're just really cute houses. And so we went for a walk one day, and we came past a little lake where we decided to have a picnic, and it was, oh my God, it was just absolutely stunning. It was one of these moments you have where you just so in awe of your surroundings. It was a natural pond. I don't know if it was completely natural. I think it was actually looked after by humans, but it was absolutely beautiful. And there were some frogs in the pond, and they were talking to each other, and there were lovely sea lilies, water lilies, not sea lilies, water lilies, and wonderful trees, and the birds were tweeting in the trees, and so on. And I was sitting there, and suddenly I thought, oh my God, I mean, I'm always saying we are part of nature, we are it. But I somehow saw in that moment the whole thing on a far deeper level, the intelligence which we are part of. We are not just nature. We are not the grass. We are the intelligence behind what makes the grass grow, what makes our heart beat at night. And I always did see that, but not on that deep level. And that is the isness and the oneness. That is it. And that is what we are part of. This wonderful, amazing, beautiful. I can't even find words for it. It's that's what we are part of. And it's completely, utterly neutral. It has no opinion. It doesn't say anything positive or negative. It is just completely, utterly neutral, and we are part of that. Part of that. And we have the capacity then to think ourselves separate from that. That is what makes us human. And that is where you always say the needless suffering can start when we see that, we are part of that, we're never alone. We get lost because we are human and we live in our human form, but we never really get lost.
Yeah.
We are home. We are home.
Yeah.
And that is what Sydney Banks saw when he had that moment where he was sitting in the living room and he just saw that he was sucked into like this tunnel, what he was saying. But it is that expansion, what he noticed, this oneness, this isness.
Yeah.
And there is no suffering. There is no suffering.
You ask, you ask, pertaining to, what I thought about what happens to us, that we do suffer, that we uh, and Sid explained it very well. I thought, at some point he said, when you come into this existence, you're in a body, and you immediately you see physicality, and you come from the formless into the form, and the form has such it's a lot, and right there you can see the potential, to create a separation. The physicality is so much, it remains a lot, throughout life, and so it's only it it's understandable that people would think of themselves as separate from which they are never separate from, but they can think they are, and then the egotism born of that creates an illusion of separation. And again, the principle of thought allows us to recognize that illusion, and so we're equipped to see that it's not real, um, but it and it creates all manner of mental suffering, a needless suffering, um, And as people break through that illusion, they you know, they elevate, they they uh, they they transcend, um, and they see again, oh, you know, what was I thinking? You know, sort of like you found there, you know, at the pond. Oh, what was I thinking about this woman? Like, you know, what was I doing? You know, like, so you know, the illusion of separation breaks apart, breaks apart, breaks apart, breaks apart, and you find you find the oneness again. That's the cure and the healing benefits of truth. And so I, you know, I think in in my imagination about the future of teaching and mental life and mental existence, this sort of course will be built in to the curriculum, you know, and so people will hear about this and they will know, oh, okay, and because everyone can identify with it, but to have it disappear as a reality, and what that means is your personal thinking system gets quieter and quieter and then disappears, and you're still fully functioning and you're still all together with it, and but you don't have the needless suffering going on, and everybody deserves to hear about that, uh because it's what you you it's a universal story, human thought, and then the disappearance of it, and that's not a it's not a judgment, it's not a it's a life story, it's a universal story, it's the story of all universal stories, and it needs to be told and told again because it's true, and uh as it melts away, like you found and I found and many others have found as well, um, it changes our behavior and but we cannot be alone. We, we cannot be forsaken. We cannot be um, pain, you know, in the pain and suffering of isolation or hurt or insecurity, fear, all those symptom patterns that seem to be built into life on this earth, uh, are not at all. And what an amazing cure! What an amazing revelation that that's just um, needless suffering. And and when Sid Banks talked about that, he said in one way he was talking to us who were teaching people, and he said something that was quite shocking to me. He said, I'm not interested in your suffering. I'm not interested in your problems, which was like, what? You know, for me as a psychologist, I never heard anyone say, I'm not interested in your problems. I thought they came with the professional identity of being a people helper, you know, and he said, no, you're interested in the health and the oneness, and so you speak to that, and and he said then you can go into any university, any business retreat, anyone, and you can be the keynote speaker, and you can because this is your area of expertise. This is what you know, and you don't need credentials, because him being a welder, I saw him go to, university medical schools and talk to 400 physicians and their wives, and they were all there to listen to the welder, and they did. But, I mean, that's just a remarkable, right there, you ought to go, what? 400 physicians and their wives are listening to a welder? Like, what kind of deal is that? Well, that's perfectly fitting and normal, given what he said about that's not the world. You don't have to know anything about medicine or surgeries or teamwork or who's involved with what and all that. That's not your message. That's not what you have to pay any attention to whatsoever. So he would go into jails, he would go into university, he'd go into medical schools, he'd go into all kinds of different, any situation, with complete confidence and no insecurity and nothing on his mind to care about all the various thinking that everybody was doing in the room. Just a remarkable proposition.
Is there anything else you you want to say about body and mind? Is there any final words you would like to say to that? We could
No,
go here really practical, but I think we don't need to dive into it.
yeah. I think we've pretty well laid it out there, and thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you and talk to your audience and anyone out there listening. I'm glad that you could be with us today. And
thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much for joining us here. And yes, I hope that a lot of people are hearing something for themselves. That's we can only hope for, and the rest is not up to us. So yes, so thank you.
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.